Hello and welcome to the Media Bolt Podcast. Whether you are recording for the first time or whether you're a great TikToker like our guest today, we're going to give you all the tactical tips, tricks, and advice to help you the next time you hit record. Let's be honest, if you live in Milwaukee, let's be honest, if you live on planet Earth, you know this guy. JMatt, founder of #MKE, community activist, so many things that we look up to you for because, you know, you really do such a good job of so many things, whether it's community work, whether it's networking, whether it's bringing people together. There's a lot of things that, you know, we've been like, oh, he does that really well. How can we do that too really well? So JMatt, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for all the flattery.
Many more, much more to come. I want to start just briefly because I think it's important talking about your time at Kiss FM.
Mm-hmm.
What was your role there in, you know, looking at your life today? What lessons do you think maybe you didn't see at the time, but kind of came through that?
Yeah, so for Kiss FM, at the time, Entercom Milwaukee, I was working for their Madison stations and would commute each weekend so that I could be on the air for the weekends. I was a very part-time person, kind of earning my ranking there. And at some point, I moved to Milwaukee, worked for a nonprofit, and they've not even to my knowledge, had an eye on me for some of the things that you had mentioned, my social media savviness. And they created a position for me when an on-air spot opened. And they made me the digital program director. In radio, program manager, program director is very common, but they're in charge of things on the air. Whereas I then became in charge of email marketing, website content, social media. And then I also coached all of the full-time on-air talents for Kiss FM and our sister station, 99.1 The Mix.
Yep.
So it was a role that was really set up and was perfect for me. And then it also came, of course, with the full-time on-air show, and I did that for 18 months prior to the pandemic. And it was a lot of fun, not only because, it was my job was to talk to people on the radio, but I grew up in the area, and I grew up listening to Kiss FM. I grew up listening to Allie when she was with Wes and Ronnie. So to then get on the station and be the show after Allie was just surreal to me. It was like, is this happening? Like dream job, dream station. It was incredible. So yeah, radio was just a lot of fun to get into, especially at Kiss FM. And there's something that I teach people or coach people that want to get a better confidence on camera and with, even if they want to get into radio or they just want to be more visual on camera. What I did was kind of by accident, and I realized it was helping. I, for a while on the radio, would get the feedback that I didn't sound conversational. I sounded a little scripted, a little early radio days.
Yep.
Totally. Everybody starts rough. And Snapchat had just come out.
Okay.
And stories were going, and Instagram stole stories, as Instagram does for things. And I started making myself each day do some story thing where I talked to the camera, and I got used to being video and hearing my voice and then noticing like how I can be more conversational. And of course, that transitions over to my radio presence. So anyone trying to find their voice and be more confident, story is the way. Plus, it's only up for 24 hours. So if you hate it, it's going to be gone. Yeah. There's no pressure, really.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And what was that like transitioning out of that? I mean, you know, circumstances happen and, you know, you were able to really rebound, I think. You know, what was the transition? Or maybe introduce us to maybe how that became you kind of, oh, okay, well, now I'm not just doing it to help my radio. You know, now I'm kind of doing it for me here.
Well, that's the thing. There was a gray area when I worked in radio in the sense that everybody had a personal brand, everybody had their personal social media, and then the radio station's like, well, you're gaining followers because you're on the radio. So really, we should own those additional accounts, which was an internal debate. Luckily, didn't happen, but that concept of like, we want you to really put your focus into the radio station and do that. And then us having the side brand, because it's like, radio, this station isn't forever. People get let go suddenly all the time. So you have to be building up something on the outside so that when you leave, if you only invested in your brand, and this goes beyond radio, if you're the social media person or the face for another brand that's like a corporate brand, make sure you're building your own thing up, because when you get let go, cool, that stays with the company. So you have to be building something up so that when you leave on your own, get let go, or try to do your own thing, you have that built up and you take that with you. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. And when you were saying it, I was thinking of like, they say you need to own your audience, and, obviously TikTok, YouTube, like it's their audience, but necessarily, in the way you're explaining it, LinkedIn kind of had gone through that renaissance as well of like, do we really want the CEO also having a personal brand? Does it help the business? Does it help them? And it's like, well, it helps both. Like, as somebody who was, early on in LinkedIn video creation, like I always took the stance of like, well, it helps both. And, people's interests change. Like, I don't know the statistics. Maybe I'm talking totally wrong, but like the amount of people, maybe percentage wise, that are staying in one career for their entire life is probably diminishing over time.
Right.
So to have something that's like, okay, how do you showcase the person that's at the office, and how do you showcase the person that you actually are outside of the office? So I think you did answer the question, but how did you then kind of create that presence for yourself?
So I've been working in social media for 16 years. I did the math recently, and I was like, 16? That's longer than I expected.
MySpace has been around for...
MySpace was the original place I was on. I had a radio station MySpace account for sure. Website management was rough back then. Facebook was just starting, but they didn't have pages for businesses yet. So I've been around the block a few times. But the social media thing is like, I tried so many different things. There's so many beta apps that came out. Like, I'm guessing you were a part of the whale Q&A rush.
I was not.
Oh, okay.
Actually. So that's an interesting one. Cause like, I always, when you're like, how do I curate ideas for content? It's always like Quora. And it's like, I'm assuming Whale Q&A was kind of like that, but more social platform specific.
Whale Q&A was an interesting one. It's not a real thing anymore. They had a good thing where you would ask people questions and they would answer you via video. And this was before video content really started rolling. And they tweaked it so much that the video part went away. And we're like, that's what made you different and cool. And then it dropped off. But I am an early adopter. So I was on Whale Q&A. I was on TikTok back when it was Musical.ly, but I really didn't do much. I tried to do Vine, didn't really work, couldn't figure it out. I was on TikTok and I was pushing it hard in 2019. And I said, this is the next thing. This is the thing you have to get on. You have to be playing with this. You have to figure this platform out. Because at the time, being on radio, Billie Eilish was just coming up and she was blowing up largely in part of TikTok. And then I noticed it with... little something. What's his name? The cowboy, the Old Town Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget his name.
You can chime in, Justin.
Lil Nas X. Thank you. I was not going to get there. But he blew up because of TikTok as well. And so I was noticing these things like if music's blowing up here, people are going to blow up here. As I was trying to get active on that platform, I was getting like 4,000 followers a week because I stumbled upon a style of content that I no longer do, but it was puzzle content.
Explain that.
Yeah, it's puzzling. I couldn't help it. So essentially, knowing that it's kids essentially on TikTok at the time, and it really did skew young, it's like, okay, well, what can I put out there that I see other people doing that does well? Well, you put a riddle or some sort of puzzle. And I have very elaborate ideas on how to make things happen. And TikTok wasn't nearly as savvy as it is now. So I took, you had 15 seconds. That was the other kicker.
Yep.
They hadn't extended it yet. So in 15 seconds, I do explain this riddle or puzzle for you to then have you duet the video and see if you could solve it. So I took a whiteboard.
Yes.
I would put it here. I learned how to write backwards while not looking, which was at the time a helpful skill.
Yes.
So I had to figure out, okay, how do I show this? Explain it, look at the camera, put my face in, and have this be a whole thing, because a lot of the other puzzle creators at the time were just showing like a POV of their site, doing their hands and their content, which is like, oh, there's no confidence there. And I was on the air at the time. I was like, oh, I don't mind being present. I don't mind being there. I was the only one doing that. And I had several videos hit 1 million views. And then you'd have people come in and be like, this is impossible, or blah, blah, blah. I took tricky ones too.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So like I knew exactly what I was doing, but I couldn't keep it up in the sense that I didn't care about that content. I was just trying to see what would work. And you would either get notifications of people getting the right answer or troll answers. And I was just like, this is boring to me. So I gained like 25,000 followers from puzzle content. The hard thing was then transitioning from that into what I do now. Because at the time I didn't know what I want to do. I was trying so many different things and they just didn't stick. And when I got let go from the radio station because of the pandemic, literally that weekend, I think it was like voting weekend or something, or early voting, and there's a huge line of cars downtown Milwaukee. And I was like, oh, I got to talk about this on the air on Monday. Oh, I'm not on the air anymore.
Yeah.
Where am I going to talk about this? So it became, because when you work in radio or really any profession that is relatable, where you have to like talk about things going on in your day, you just get this sixth sense to notice things that most people aren't. And then you make a mental note or you write it down so that you can continue with it. And that obviously continued after I got let go. And it was like, how do I use all this that I'm seeing? I figured out how to make good blog content for the radio station, all this sort of stuff. I was like, how do I take that knowledge and bring it over to something else? And TikTok was not even in the forefront of my mind at the time. I tried playing with Facebook a little bit, all the platforms I was already on, stories, that's great. It was in July of 2020. I was on the Milwaukee River. Have you guys ever heard of the pirate barge?
I think you took me there, or I don't know if it was you that took me there, but I have been there with Ian. Yeah, I don't know if Ian was the one that was.
Yeah. So we had been there in the past, and that was a fun time. And then I had heard that it was getting sold like the next week. And Ian's like, well, I'm on the water all the time. Where do you guys want to go? And I was like, let's go to the pirate barge, right? So to get there, you have to go under this bridge. Yep. And at that point, the water levels were pretty high because I think we got a lot of snow late in the season or something, and
melt off.
Right. So it's a high levels. So I was unemployed at the time, and the people on the boat were leaders and whatnot. So I was introduced as the TikToker because at the time, 25,000 was pretty impressive. It had nothing to do with what impressive. I do. Yeah, exactly. And so someone's like, oh, you should make this a TikTok. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, you film this and I'll post it. And So we go under the bridge, like centimeters clearance.
Which is already a sketchy
It's a sketchy vibe.
No matter what.
And the other guy, Ian, there was another guy at the front of the boat. And at the last minute, he decides to like change his position, which means switching under this beam where like dangerous. And then I'm up there real low. And then I add a voiceover saying, hey, we're going to this pirate barge, which then people are like, what's a pirate barge? And so we ride all the way over there. I take the footage outside. And of course, while I was there, I already went on the barge. I shot that content. But for the video, back before people were overly annoyed by part twos, I go and I was like, hey, if this blows up, I'll go back and get on the pirate barge and show you what it's like on it. I had already planned on doing it. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, 10,000 views and some engagement. I was really right around 10,000. I was like, I'll post it at 10,000. Well, in a day, it hit 1 million views because I used the phrase centimeters instead of inches. And they're like, this is America. Why are you using centimeter? That's
purposely pissing people off.
It wasn't even on purpose. I was trying to like emphasize the
finite.
I was like, so that you get that going on. The guy switching his head from the beam real last second, that was sketchy. Then the pirate barge itself, it just had so many weird things to it.
It is cool because like when you get out, when you realize that you aren't dead because you did make that, then it's like, oh my gosh, it's like right there.
And then you're like, oh, that's why they were going, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
So at the end of a week, I gained 50,000 followers. And it sits at 5.3 million views.
That's crazy.
And so then the thought is, okay, how do I continue on this momentum? Viral content's great if it's not like a one-off. So then it took me a second to realize what the answer was, because I tried pirate content and that was rough.
Okay.
I know. I went down that road. I was like, how much can I like take from the pirate barge and really stretch it?
What part do people really like of this?
Right.
Not the pirates.
The core of it that I thankfully realized were people in the comments who were saying, I live in Milwaukee, or, oh, I've been to that. That was old school. Or most of them are like, I lived or live in Milwaukee, and I had no idea that was a thing. And I was like, there's a lot of Milwaukee people in here. I could probably keep this going. And I tested it by doing 5 beer gardens as my next video, and that blew up. And I was like, all right, figured it out.
Yeah.
And that's how I transitioned from my Kiss FM content into social media, and it's just kind of gone ever since.
Those were 2 things that I had in my notes. Like the barge video, I think was really impactful because, like you said, it was one of those moments that you definitely didn't wake up that morning like, I'm going to do this and it's going to, there's no purpose there. And leading into the 5 events happening, what has been kind of like your biggest revelation with really what your audience is? Because like initially you had an audience that was there for a very different reason. And I've been through this too with, streaming on Twitch and then becoming a business owner and, health and wellness and all that. Like I've shifted. Sometimes your audience brings it with you. Sometimes they don't. Now, obviously you grew a very different audience from that video specifically, but like, was there any kind of dips in that because, different audience?
I never saw a dip. Unfortunately, with hashtag MKE created an agency account for TikTok, giving me agency access to the creator marketplace, which I think at the time probably still is the case. You have to be a TikToker with at least 100,000 followers to get into this club, which then allows brands to connect directly to you through TikTok. I think they may have changed it to like 50,000 or something. I'm not for sure, but from being in there, I was able to kind of look and see these other opportunities. And one of the things in the analytics, because you, the creator, have your own analytics.
Yep.
But apparently it's not full analytics, because this other side, the agency side, that now I'm looking at my analytics that's exposed to agencies to work with you, shows different analytics.
Interesting.
And one of them showed your inactive follower count. And mine was at like 30%, which isn't shocking because I'd been at it for a while and it's puzzle content and whatever.
Though.
And what I would love to do is say, okay, I have 30% inactive. Can I remove them all?
Yeah.
Because that would help my engagement rate so much. But I don't know who the inactive ones are. But if you're able to show me that, clearly you know who they are.
Yeah.
Let me hit a button. I don't care. Follower count's a vanity number anyways. So let me get rid of them. 30% of 180,000 is, I'll still have over 100,000 followers. Easy. So it won't matter.
Yeah. How many user 2478976s are?
And you can go through and see them. That
do you really want to do that work?
It's 30%. That's like 30,000. I don't know the number. It's probably 35. It's higher than 30.
Probably about 50.
Yeah, it's a chunk, and I'm like, I don't have time for that. And I wouldn't give an intern that project either. No. Who's going to do that? There should be an option where I can just knock them out.
Yeah, I agree. So because of those, you still do the 5 events, and that's become very successful. Creating content for the city has opened many doors within the city. Do you want to talk about some of those things that have kind of opened up because of this, influencership, if you will? Yeah,
the 5 events, just touch on that real quick. So the community for hashtag MKE is a networking community at its core for content creators and social media enthusiasts that meets every second Thursday of the month, blah, blah, blah. So that...
We'll get into that.
Yeah, I know. The reason the 5 events thing happened was because I was like, we're not hosting events right now because of the pandemic. How do I keep this page active? And the other thing was knowing that my main pages needed to stay active and whatnot. I wanted to promote local stuff, local events, but time-sensitive content kills your page. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to like mix in things that are going to kill my momentum. Well, you know what? Hashtag MK can take that bullet for me. I was like, it's important stuff. I can tag a lot of people. It has a purpose, but like I don't post enough on those accounts anyways that it's going to really suffer. So having the time-sensitive content event-based, I was like, all right, hashtag have at it. And then it gave me the opportunity to tag a lot of different businesses and brands, and then they were able to share it out. And then Like I have since had people come up to me and recognize me specifically from the 5 events. So every now and then, because it takes time to do that, to find the things and figure out everything you want to do, edit up, put it out there. It takes longer than you'd think. So it has come to it a few times where I'm like, I don't know, I'm going to keep this 5 events thing going. And then I'll get somebody in the streets being like, oh, I love your 5 events. And I was like, well, all right, I guess I'll keep it going.
It's tough because, you know, it is something where it's like you do such a good job of like explaining the things and showcasing what you can, when you can, how you can. And it is so much more than just here's a list.
Right.
Or like you're not like 5 events in Milwaukee, read caption, you know, like that's now kind of the thing.
And I learned too the hard way, of course, because your followers or people watching the content will complain if you don't do something right. It's like, oh, you know, your list of 5 for not even the events, but like when I would say, here's 5 places for XYZ, they're like, in the caption for Instagram, you should put all the locations so that if I want to just skim it real quick, I can. And I was like, yeah, I should do that. So I did end up doing that, but I do that with the 5 events too. So if you do want to see a list and just see it quick, it's in the caption, but you can also just kind of consume it and I tell you what's going on.
TikTok had character limits previously though, didn't it?
Yeah.
Were you doing it at that like time?
I wasn't doing it on TikTok and I still don't do it on TikTok that way because it's sloppy.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
I don't like
Instagram is fine because we're already used to long captions there and it is what it is.
Yeah. So within that, you know, you've taken this whole conglomerate of your TikTok and, you know, I love every couple months I'll read some articles about you because, you know, your statements there are so true. I forget which one was Donald Driver at, the Flugtag or the Cream Puff?
Oh yeah, Flugtag.
So like your quote of like, you know, I'm a TikToker and I'm next to a Hall of Fame, you know, like talk to me about some of that stuff. Yeah,
sorry, I went detoured, but we're back now.
No, I like it.
I got ADHD. It happens. So the opportunities that have come through the content, up until this point, anything you see that has hashtag ad on my content, those brands have come to me. I have not reached out to a single one, which is just, I'm beside myself half the time. I'm like, I don't know how I got Red Bull knocking on my door.
Right.
Red Bull Flugtag, there was an event where, if you don't know, teams of 4 or 5 made makeshift flying machines, which it was basically made out of cardboard and whatever. And you were on I think 30-foot platform, and your team pushed it, had a pilot, and saw how far it would glide, and whoever glided the furthest.
I don't know what the proper.
I know. I was like, I don't know what this is. Glid. As well as like judging critiques is a combination thing. That's what that competition was. But they needed 5 judges. One of which, Donald Driver, makes sense. They had the woman from Quick Trip social media, who's the face of that, but also like Quick Trip was a huge sponsor, so that made sense. They had a, I don't want to get the phrase wrong. I think drag queen entertainer.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too while you were.
Yeah, she was there, and then there was a Red Bull athlete from motocross. So like everyone had their specific things, and then there's me who's just like, I just see myself as a regular person. I don't care about numbers and whatever, but like I get it to others. You see 180,000 and you're like, oh, we got to work with this guy because he's got that local audience. He's making local content. And that's how Red Bull reached out. Culver's I've worked with. I'm thinking of ones that I'm working with right now that aren't approved
that
yet,
can't
talk about yet. So like I'm working with brands now, which will be impressive. Instagram, so if you don't know alcohol content, you can't do branded content on TikTok that's alcohol. You can do alcohol content on TikTok, but once someone's paying you to push alcohol, that's the red flag. And that took me a little learning curve. It was a hard lesson to learn. And then I'd forget that was a thing. And I'd be like, yeah, let's do both. And then I was like, oh, no. So now it's clearly just Instagram that I can schmooze with that one. So I have a notable alcohol brand that I will be posting about. This is going to air in December, so I will have already posted about it. But yeah, I don't want to jinx it. So just having alcohol brands reach out to me, like, I don't really make alcohol content, first of all, but I have that local southeastern Wisconsin audience. So I had a tequila brand that reached out to me, Yave Tequila, and they wanted to reach the Wisconsin audience.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, I'll make some drinks. I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll make it fun. So it's just fascinating, the different brands that are coming to me. I've got one that's working with the Bucks that wants me to work, and it's like a cleaning brand, which I'm like, I don't understand how this works. Like, what's the connection here? And then they're like, oh, the Bucks, we've got something with them. I was like, oh, there's the connection. I'm sure I can figure something out, but it's just fascinating, the different brands. And like, those are the brands I say yes to. There's tons of brands that'll reach out and you're like, this seems like scam or a spam, or it just doesn't make sense with my personal brand. Even at a stretch, you're like, I can't make this work. But yeah, I'm not at the point where I'm like, yeah, I've earned this. Like, I get it. You can say I've earned it. But like, at the same time, I'm like, I don't take it for granted, I think is the way I say it.
Yep.
So me sitting next to Donald Driver, I'm just like, I've got quite an interesting interaction with Donald Driver. My whole thing is with famous people, I like to intentionally try to get them to laugh. Yes. Because if you can get them to laugh, it's like, all right, you're good with this person. Because it's awkward otherwise. And I got Donald Driver laughing a few times, even when we were judging, because you knew Donald Driver's not going to be a harsh judge because everybody loves the guy. He can't play that role. And then I realized everybody in my group was playing the nice role. And I was like, well, this isn't entertaining.
Yeah.
Someone's got to be the heel. Someone's got to be the Simon Cowell.
Yeah.
So I gave children a 1. The youngest team, I gave them a 1, and people booed me. And I set the precedent early. I did not give out 10s easily. So anytime I did give a 10, they came to me. They're like, you don't give 10s out. What's going on here? And of course, as the person often giving the low score, they also came to me. So also that helps with mic time. Yes. So you stand out in both ways. And it got to the point where Donald would look over a couple times because he'd be looking at his scorecards and he had a vibe like, I want to score this team low. And he's like, JMatt, what are you doing? And I look and he's like, oh, good luck. And then he was safe to do whatever he wanted because he knew at least he'd be higher than my 4.
Yeah, he's not looking like the bad guy.
Right. Yeah. So that was a nice little bond that we had while we were judging.
Yeah, I want to give you credit because, like, you know, I know you know this and you're humble enough anyway, but like you're there because you exemplify Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, for Red Bull, they're trying to come into the market and it, you know, Fluke Talk in Milwaukee, like it's a weird thing anyway, it's but like
event.
It was a great relationship from an outside perspective because, you know, you represent Milwaukee in such a way and obviously they're going to get people that they can name drop. Obviously they needed a Red Bull representative. They need the sponsor representative, Donald Driver, you know, everybody that was there, but I'm giving you credit for that. I'm letting you give yourself credit for that because that is vitally important.
I think it's also the TikTok angle. If we're being totally transparent, TikTok was hot at the time. It's still hot, but it's also like, we got to get the kids. We got to get on TikTok. Who's doing local content on TikTok for this area?
And then I was like, is mostly kids though?
No.
So like,
yeah, but that's the perception.
Like they kind of,
that's the perception.
Like, hilariously in the background, they kind of missed the mark. On a very literal statistical level.
Yeah, right. But that's how they didn't tell me that's what they were looking for. But like them coming to me as the TikToker, I always view it like, oh, you want to reach the younger generation.
That is,
you got to do TikTok. So yeah.
So moving on. Well, I guess before I get too far ahead of myself, what would you attribute that success to? I mean, obviously like the TikTok and you are branded so well within Milwaukee, but what would you attribute kind of everybody that's out there who's trying to be good on social media would kill for your amount of inbound leads? Yeah, what do you attribute that to?
It's the easiest yet hardest thing for advice. It's consistency. Keep showing up. I certainly was super consistent 2020, 2021. Then I got a job that just consumed a lot of my time and I just slowed down significantly. I'm hoping to ramp back up again, of course. But as my content was multiple times a week, you don't have to do daily. That's false. Like, sure, if you do daily, you're going to like exceed faster, but we don't all have time for that.
Yeah. I'm
doing 1 a week if I'm lucky. The 5 events, I don't count that. I don't count the push-ups, which I'm sure we'll chat about later. honestly, I forget about that as content, which is technically content. I'm like, I make like a video once or twice a week, and people are like, but this and that. I was like, oh, I do daily stuff, but I also like what I'm thinking of it is like the stuff that takes me longer time that is really intentional. That I think I've detoured a little too much. Where were we?
No, you answered the question because the question was really what do you attribute that success to, and consistency is the answer to that. Were there, before I move ahead, were there any interesting things about the cream puff contest?
Yeah, so the cream puff thing was an interesting one. I shouldn't be in eating contests because I'm not in college. When it came to like slamming your beverage, I couldn't do it because like I just gag reflexes, like not something I could figure out. So then extend that into food and trying to eat real fast. I was like, oh, this isn't good. So my younger brother said, you should like headbutt it and like make a mess and blah, blah, blah. And I had gotten advice from Allie Faith, who had won it in the past. And she's like, you got to get the tops off and then you suck up the cream and you eat the thing. So I was going with Allie's advice first. And I tried to remove the top of it, and then I got one off, and then I tried to remove the second one. It gets stuck on my cheek, and I was like, I was like trying to shake it off. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, this isn't working. I got to go chaos mode, per what my younger brother said. And then I boom. And the thing that people don't realize about that video is I had a Bluetooth mic up there to capture the sound. Yeah. So the camera person is out in the crowd, significantly far away. So when you hear the thuds, because you're seeing that vantage point, you're like, he's doing it really hard and loud to be able for us to hear it so clear.
Meanwhile, it's just a microphone.
And the microphone's just there. It wasn't that hard, but it did sound pretty hard. And so that became a whole scene. The guy that's doing the announcing like was like, oh man, he's doing his own little thing. And I put that all together, and that went pretty up and boom, boom. And I really do it. And I have the mic up there again, but like I admittedly hit it harder than the last time. And like all over the place, huge mess. Love it. Here's the thing. The buns are oddly stiff.
They are. I think that's the most.
So being able to like hit it with your head and break it apart actually makes it easier to get the pieces in.
Yes.
And then I learned why I will never win an eating contest, because I was eating it so fast that I choked. And it was one of those modes like you either swallow it and you power through and win, or in my case, I panic and think I'm going to die. And I turn around and I do the get it cleared. And then I look back at the plate. I was like, well, this is a lot less fun now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to keep going, but of course I continue a little bit, and thankfully it's over after like 45 seconds.
Right.
And I look over to DZ from Kiss to my left, who's got splatter on him. And then I look over to the right, and there's another person splatter on them. I was like, I'm sorry, guys. I just want to, I got a little too into it. It happens. But that's the thing. I did a relay race yesterday for Feeding America. And my thing is, if you're not going to take first, make it a spectacle.
Yes.
Because even if you take first in like nice fashion, people are like, oh, you won, cool, blah, blah, blah. But the one that headbutts the cream puffs, the one that rips a bag and all the food contents from this relay race and it goes everywhere, that's what people are going to talk about. And that's exactly, I showed up this morning to this food bank thing. It's a little tangent, but it's still relevant.
Yeah.
So I get to Fox 6 this morning because my partner was Brian Polson from Fox 6. And he took some blame, but like he had a GoPro on his head. I had a GoPro on my neck. So we had like POV shot content, which was great. And I didn't watch the segment live, but I noticed that it was up and I was like, let me take a look at this. And they were dragging me on Fox 6. So they were like, oh yeah, well, I see that you're taking the blame of like, oh, you should have walked instead of like run and made the things bounce, but let's go back to your partner. He's the one that bagged it. And I was like, you guys. But they said it was performing really well online because it was a spectacle.
Yep.
Accidentally, honestly, we did not plan that. We had the pace to win for sure.
Oh, wow.
And then when it ripped, we're like, and I was like, we're finishing this. I need the content.
Yeah.
We're finishing this.
Yeah. And I think going back to the cream puff thing, like, you know, any food contest, this is totally an unrelated point. I feel like if you make the biggest mess, you by proxy have the least amount left.
That's
and I think like
too.
if you're just a judge, you don't care. And honestly, the people there don't care who wins either. So they're really just looking at, on a quick glance, who's got the least amount left in the plate. And if you make the biggest mess, there's the least amount left in your plate.
If it's on my face and I can't use my hands.
They're not judging what's on your face. They're only judging what's left on the plate.
If it's smeared on my face, which the first year it was covered and they took photos. Interestingly, I don't want to like take credit and be like, it's because of me. But like that year, the first year I went to it, it was a good turnout or whatever. From what I've heard, this year's turnout was the best ever. So if I've got content of me heckin', I know I can swear, but still, it's of me doing the headbutt and like getting a mess, and that content goes around. People are like, oh, I got to go see it. And then I go next year and I do it again.
Yeah.
The problem is now, because I know I'm not going to win.
You're shoot in.
What do I do? Because I don't want to keep headbutting the thing. I thought about like taking a boba straw and just,
that would be interesting.
Right? But I'm like,
now it's how else can you make it a spectacle?
How can I make it a spectacle without repeating myself?
Yes. That is an interesting point. Moving on, real quick to clear the air. GIF or GIF?
Oh, it's GIF.
Thank God.
It's Giphy.
Yes.
It's not Jiffy.
Thank you. But I want to talk about that because, you know, you're like, I forget what the recent count is, but it's hundreds of millions of GIF views.
Yeah, it's 320 million.
I said hundreds.
I know. I just wanted the 3 in the front.
So how, why, and what has it done for you?
It is phenomenal.
Take that anywhere.
I have people from high school that I have not talked to in 15 years. That's how old I am. That have reached out and they're like, oh, are you a GIF? And I was like, I am a GIF. Good to talk to you. And then see you later. And like the knock on wood one, I get people occasionally that'll be like, I use this one all the time. And like, thank you for using my stuff. So I used to do these things called Twitter chats or X chats now. I don't know if they transition, but back in the day, they were Twitter chats. And it was conversations on a niche topic. And for a lot of the ones I joined, it was social media. And we were talking about how do you stand out, even in like the scenario of the chat, because if a lot of people are engaged and you're trying to get your answer to stand out, how do you stand out? And along the way, somebody had a custom GIF and he stood out. I was like, oh, how do you do that? And then this other guy in the chat was like, I made a tutorial on how to do this through Giphy. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So I look into it. And then apparently on Giphy, you can get verified. And I was like, ooh, that sounds cool too. But like, honestly, it had zero like expectations of it happening. So I upload a couple, and then the goal was to upload it to Giphy, take like a video, upload it to Giphy, make it a GIF, download it, have it in my favorites folder, and then be able to use it on these Twitter chats and social media as I want to as uploaded content. That was the goal. But then I was like, oh, with an artist account, you can get verified. I was on Kiss FM part-time at the time, but my personality had a page on Kiss's website. So I put that as the link. I made sure everything looked like Kiss, and I put like 103.7 Kiss FM on-air talent. I mean, it seemed bigger than it was. And my first 8 GIFs had Kiss FM logo in the background.
Yep.
So I uploaded all that, and then I submitted it. By the end of the day, I got verified.
Wow.
Because they're like, oh, you're a radio personality. Yeah. Of course we want to verify you. And I was like, well, that's great. And I delete those and I re-upload them because now my content's searchable. But the first 8 didn't count because it was uploaded early. So I re-upload those. And as I'm going, I'm learning the ins and outs of adding tags and this and that. And you in your dashboard can start seeing the amount of views that your GIFs are getting. So you can get an idea what's performing well, what's not. And what I was doing was reaction GIFs. And it was largely like things that I just want to have, like hello, wave, high five, blah, blah, blah. But then it got into this point because gifts are fine still, but like I used them a lot more in 2018 and 2019. And I would search for a specific thing like sneeze. And then you're like, bless you, blah, blah, blah. And the limited options, I was like, nope. Oh, what if I made one for that? Because it may not get searched a lot, but when it does, mine could be the option. So then I would take a list. And as I'm noticing things, I just, and then there's also the ones I use frequently. So like Success Kid, I was like, I could just redo that myself. I mean, it's not going to have the same meme vibe to it, but like, why use the meme kid when I can just use myself? Yeah. So I started doing all that. And I think I don't know the number of the GIFs that I've uploaded, but it's well over 100. But you can search for it by like at JMatt MKE and the keyword. Yeah. But the kicker is, unless you know that I have it, you're not looking for it that way. So you have to have the right tags that match what it is. And then my theory, and I can't confirm this because they obviously don't have that out, but if you search a key phrase, you're looking through, you see my GIF, you tap on it, whether you use it or post it or whatever, you're engaging with that. I think the platform like notices the key phrase and what gets selected, and that's how you rise higher. Okay. And I don't know what views count as. Is it like loops or what?
Is it cookied to assume it's loops? Watching it from the thing?
I don't think it. I think it's when it pops up in search.
Okay.
Because once they post, you don't really have tracker. Right. So then I'm like, is it loops? Is it just like results of how many times it's coming up? But the thing with Giphy is it powers GIF search on so many different platforms that it is the main thing. Yeah. So for it to have so many views, like, it's not just in the United States, it's like worldwide. And I've had people like literally, I have nothing to do with the conversation. They'll tag me in something and be like, look, they used your GIF. And I was like, oh, that is me. Cool.
That's interesting. Would you say that it's helped you? I guess kind of where I'm poking here is like, everybody's like, and you've been so good at this, what's the unknown social media to use? Like, so many people are like, oh, but if I can get like 1 million hits on Pinterest or, some like obscure but still kind of relevant way. So like would you say it's helped you in your TikTok and other?
Yeah, it largely helps in conversation when you're able to just respond in GIFs of yourself. Right. And they're like, whoa. And then they're like, oh, and they'll say something back. And then I'll have a very different GIF that's a perfect response to it. And because I've made so many, I've literally had like 5 responses to somebody with different GIFs that were all good uses. And they're like, how many do you have? And then I send them a link to my Giphy and they're like, wow, it works out pretty well. I've used it on dating sites too. I'm not proud of it, but I have. It's a good icebreaker. Shameless. It's a great icebreaker. I'll tell you that.
I believe it. So let's dive into #MKE. Talk about how that started, what its purpose was, what it is.
Yeah, so it started 2017, January 12th, I think. And it was to create a community of social media marketers at its core. I would go to networking events in 2016, and, it's very standard that these networking events would have financial advisors and people that aren't in your industry or your sector, and you'd schmooze with them. But like the conversations were a little dry, boring, because neither of you had like aligning like professional relations or interests. And anytime social media would come up, I'm like, oh, this is such a fun conversation. I was like, can't all my conversations be like this? Yeah. And there was, have you heard of Buffer? Yeah. So Buffer in 2016 was doing Buffer local events, kind of like LinkedIn local, but like before LinkedIn did it. And they had a local Buffer community in Milwaukee that did a one-off meetup September 2016. I go to that event and I was like, this is exactly what I want. It was a small attendance. It had 4 or 5 people.
That's it? Okay.
It was very small. And then like one person was moving, one person was getting on social media, all these sort of things. And so they needed somebody to run it. I was like, I'll volunteer. Cool, let's do it. And then as I'm getting close to like doing the first event and making it public and all that sort of thing, like November, they're like, oh, actually, we're pulling the plug on doing local events and we're just going to do one big one in different city. I know, it didn't make sense. And blah, 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 blah.
What they could have had.
What they could have had. And I was like, well, I liked it because I had a brand that did social that was somewhat well known or coming up, and I was like, that would just make my life easier. But if they're not going to do it, it's still worth doing. I'll just do it myself. And I threw around a ton of names. I was like social MKE, taken.
Yeah.
I was like Milwaukee social, and flip it around, taken. I was like, well, if I want to like stand out in SEO, I need something that's not too close to everything else. And I randomly landed on hashtag. I was like, because I'm like, what says social media? Hashtag says social media. Because then if you use my hashtag, and I've gotten the joke before, it is hashtag the word MKE.
Right.
It's not literally hashtag MKE. This is a terrible hashtag to use because it's 3 letters. And here in Milwaukee, obviously we say it means Milwaukee, but if you searched it, at least back in 2016, it was matched with a lot of like K-pop Asian content.
Yeah, anything with a 3
right.
letter
So you weren't even like getting registered for Milwaukee stuff. And I was like, on a hat and clothing, it makes sense to do it because it's quick and it's easy, but you shouldn't use literally the brand. You should use hashtag Milwaukee or a variation of it. And for us, it then had to become hashtag the word MKE. And I was like, this is a little redundant. I don't love it. So it was intended to be a place saver until I could come up with something better. And if you let a brand exist too long at a certain name, well, you just stick with it. Yep. So after a few months and I couldn't come up with anything better and I didn't have a logo or anything, I was just running with it and it worked out. I worked at a nonprofit and I was sketching different hashtags and that process took a long time. Because like, how do you make something that's not existing already? And when I pointed out, like some people are like, yeah, I noticed it right away. And then there's other people that like, oh, I was wondering why your hashtag looked broken. Like it's not a full hashtag because on the right side is an exclamation mark.
Yep.
So some people don't notice that and they see that the lines don't go all the way through and they're like, oh, it's not a full hashtag. Right. I was like, yeah, because it's intentional. It's excitement around social media. And so I had a graphic designer at this nonprofit see it and she's like, I could make that for you. I was like, that would be great. So I have a professionally done logo for free. And it was great. So that happened. So now I have like a defined brand and I'm starting to put it on my hats that I wear all the time. I would wear it on Kiss FM and all that content and people.
All your gifts.
Yeah. People started like, oh, yeah, don't you own any other hats? I was like, yes, but this is called personal branding. And I knew well enough, early enough that was important to do. And it has truly helped. Like people have stopped me on the street and they're like, I saw the hat and I knew it was you. Right. I was like, and that's why I do it. It's a little excessive.
To answer your question, yes, I have 4 other of the same hat.
I do. I have, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4,
I know, like
5.
like you're wearing an all black shape. I know you have a black and white. Like I know you have.
I have
different
6 hashtag MK hats, and there's one back when like social media was still catching up. I have one in reverse print. Okay. So that I could do like selfie content and it would be correct. And you could tell like everything else in backwards. And then you had the branding correct. Yeah. And at the time people were like, that's really smart. I was like, I know, that's why I did it.
Yeah. Because cameras freaking mirror.
And now even on Zoom calls or Teams, sometimes it does it to you and you don't want to like reverse and be confused. So I'll just put the reverse one on when I'm talking to clients. It works so well.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sure you know this, but I want to just talk about an interesting story about hashtag. Justin and I were both experts on the same day, way back in the day, and I'm sure you know because you've brought it up to us a few times.
Yeah.
But I just think it's so cool because Justin and I had no idea about each other's existence, and now we own a business together. And that was what, 2017?
2018 July.
That makes sense. It was definitely summer. So what is the importance? You still do a lot of that. I mean, Justin and I have obviously come as Meetable Productions and done headshots for hashtag MKE event. Like, what is the importance of having that aspect of it? And how do you think that helps kind of propel the brand into being something different?
We, from the start, again, social media marketing was the core. And I have always been at the welcome table, and it's gotten to the point where people have like, oh, this is so big. You should be in the event. You should be a part of it. It's like, yeah, but like, I've gone to those events where the person that created it is in the event and I can't talk to them because they're like clicked up and all that. I was like, I want to talk to them right when I get there and then cool and go mingle. So I've made it a point. Up until recently, I have an assistant that will help out at the table because I'm trying some new things as well. But for the most part, I'm the one welcoming you because as the marketer, I want to know like how you found out about the event so I know what's working.
Right.
And then I also have a chance to tell you what the group is about if you're truly new to it. And I could say, hey, this is for content creators, social media enthusiasts. And this is really our core. If you don't like social media, we're not for you. No offense, but I'm just being transparent. And I've had people not come back, and that's fine because I'm looking for a quality community based around social media marketing. I'm not looking for anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
And that's how I can filter people in and out and make the community stay consistent to what the core of it is. And that has helped us so much. And along the way, it's like, okay, how do I make this manageable for somebody that's got a full-time job, that's trying to offer a service to the community of like letting like-minded individuals come connect once a month and not make it stressful because you got to make it turnkey if you're going to keep doing it. And so obviously we had themes, we had experts, and we do that. But beyond that, it's like, okay, well, you have 12 events to figure out. One of them is our anniversary event, which we missed the first time. And someone pointed out, I was like, not going to miss that again. Oversight, dang it. And then I was like, I need something middle of the year. So I tried to make it experience-based, and that was fine. It just wasn't the right fit for what we wanted to do ultimately. And along the way, I went to a different event where you had to be a member of this group or whatever. I don't remember their name. But they offered free headshots. And I was like, that's a pretty cool idea. So I went, I got one, didn't love the headshot, but it's fine. It was free. And I was like, well, you should be offering people... You shouldn't offer people. You yourself on social media should update your profile image once a year.
Yes.
And it should reflect how you currently look. So that's anything from you've grown facial hair, you removed your facial hair, you dyed your hair color, you shaved your head like I do, you've gained weight, you lost weight. There's so many different things, but oftentimes we're like, we have that one good photo from 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Let's hope it's not that far ago. I just really like this photo. I don't want to ever change it. Yeah, but that doesn't look accurately define who you look like. So when I meet you in person, I'm going to be confused.
Yeah.
So you actually want to help yourself by keeping it up to date. And so I was like, this makes sense to offer free headshots with our community. Because also, how often are you in front of a professional photographer or even a photographer that's up and coming that has an actual camera and not their phone? So that becomes a service I offer. And I realized that it was popular. So I was like, let me offer this twice a year. So essentially June and December, because if you miss one of the events, I don't want you to wait a whole another year and maybe miss it again. If you miss this one, don't worry. In 6 months, you've got another chance. If you come to the one and you don't like the headshot you get, all right, 6 months, we'll try it again. And I try to use different photographers too, because different photographers do a better job at times of different skin tones. And that's another big thing because we're all about inclusivity and trying to get different audiences and different population and all that sort of thing to come to our events and feel welcome. Well, if I'm only having the same photographer that can only take a good photo for light skin and not the rest, that doesn't really help out. So let me try some different things and see what's really going to work out well. And I've certainly had you guys on my back burner. I'm like, if I can't confirm someone, I'm going back to them for sure. But I still want to give the up and coming photographers that shot.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because just a personal funny story. It was so funny when Justin and I did that, because there were, I'm not all saying this is a bad thing, but there were a few people, a few being more than one, that came up to us and were like, all right, I want my headshot. And we're like, all right, there's a couple, and they're like, no, I need it. And I'm like, all right. And they're like, did we take it? Oh, can I see it? Like, okay. And they're like, all right, can I get it quick? And it's like, no. And they're like, well, my agent told me to show up and get a new
I remember that person. Yeah, I do remember that.
I was the
turnaround time's about a week. It's still pretty quick.
Oh, boy. Anyway, something that I love about the event is it's not just a business card exchange.
Right.
How do you create that culture? I know that, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but how did you go about the intentionality of making it not just a button-up business card exchange?
Yeah, so year one was all about growth and letting it become what it would become. from the get-go, I wanted to do themes and experts, but like I didn't know how many people are going to show up. So I didn't want to invite you guys to be experts and have 10 people show up. Awkward.
Right.
I wanted to hit 22 times in a row before I expanded my concept. So that ended up taking a year. And even at small numbers, the first event ever, I love telling this story, 4 people, including myself, showed up. And that didn't deter me to be like, oh, no, I don't want to keep doing it. I was like, 4 people showed up. I had 3 people to talk to. We had talked about podcasting, social media, everything. And we had great conversations because the 3 that showed up knew it was social media focused, and we had good conversations. The next event had 10 people. And for a while, it was like 10 to 15. But those events would end at 9 or 8. And we would stay until 11 o'clock and they would be kicking us out. And we continue to have great in-depth conversations with everyone that showed up. It gets harder to do the more people that show up, which is a good problem to have. But I do truly appreciate the small turnouts, as long as, you know, it's over 10 at least. I do appreciate that turnout because then I don't have to like worry about being the host so much that I just have to stay stationed at the front. I can kind of work the room and have these conversations and have a good engagement. And I just kind of let the club become the community become what it is. And I didn't even know that the community had named themselves. It made sense. I just didn't put it together until like a year. Like it came up like in a post and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. They all call themselves hashtaggers. Yeah. Makes sense. I just was not aware of it. And I was like, how did I miss this? Like, cool. So like they're doing things on their own without me. I'm setting up the opportunity for people to meet offline. For a while, we did after parties where people in the group were like, yeah, we're going to go blah, blah, blah. You figured out getting us here. And now that we're here, we had a conversation during networking and we want to keep this going.
I've seen that.
We're going to go to a bar. We're going to go to food. Da, 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 da. So I would get invited to my own after party. Right. But it was fun to kind of see everybody doing their own thing. It has been interesting post-pandemic. It's a different culture for sure. It's some of our regulars are no longer there. You've got people that moved away. You have people that aren't in social media marketing anymore, so it's not relevant to them. And they only did social media marketing because of their job. They didn't do it because they enjoyed it personally. And then a really good thing, I'm very proud of this for the group overall, we attract a lot of introverts. And normally introverts don't like going to networking events. So for me, being in that welcome table, I can kind of get an idea of who's a little bit shy or who's not really in their comfort zone. I chat them up. I figure out what they want to talk about. And then in the room, I point somebody out and I say, well, Martin over there, he does cost headphones and he does filmmaking. Da, da, da. Oh, you want to do more LinkedIn content? Well, there's this person over here. Yeah. Or if it's a catch-all, Matt Curtis, who comes to all my events, I'm just like, here you go to that person. And everybody knows that I send people to, if that person comes to you and say, oh, JMatt over there said I should talk to you about blah, blah, blah. They've just gotten code that JMatt wants me to help make it more comfortable for them. Yeah. And that community of the regulars is great because they'll step in when needed. Or I'll notice somebody that is just isolated themselves, aren't really engaged. And I'll pull one of the regulars aside and be like, here's your challenge. Yeah. Go engage with that person. And then they feel more included. I think one of the reasons why our culture is also different now as opposed to pre-2020, introverts may be less comfortable coming out now because of all the various factors. Yeah. So those are 3 things that certainly impacted our community, and we're trying to rebuild. And we started coming back, I want to say 22, 21, something around there. And we started getting some of the regulars and we started getting things. And I've got this TikTok audience that now is starting to enter the scene. So it's just trying to figure out, okay, what makes sense? Do we go back to our basics? Do we go back to the roots? I started inviting experts again. We did industry based and it was hit or miss. So we're still trying to navigate and figure out, okay, but what makes sense? Because I don't want to give up on it. Right. I had 4 people show up to the first one and it's still a good conversation. Even when I have low turnout, it's still good conversations all around. And sometimes it leads to work for me and whatnot. So it's worth doing. It's just trying to figure out how to improve outreach and trying to get more people involved. I am currently trying to figure out how do I get Gen Z there, and not to be like Gen Z, but like early on when we started, we had a lot of college students come because we had the idea of that you're an intern to marketing director, and we had both come to the events.
Right.
So you'd be able to find a mentor and talk to that. We've still got a lot of those professionals, but I'm missing the student element. And I'm trying to figure out how do we get students to come and want to be a part of networking events? Because I know just in general, I think back in the day, networking events intimidating. I think post-pandemic, they're even more intimidating for whatever reason. I've just kind of gotten that vibe from the younger generation. They're less interested in coming to networking events than they may have been 5 years ago.
I don't know. I agree. I don't know. It's like, my mom works in an elementary school, and it's like, she had 2-3 years where all the kids didn't learn with other kids. And I think like there's a little bit of that where it's like, we did all of this by ourselves, and now it's like, ooh, there's a comfort zone. There's a bubble there that I
have to go out if I don't want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have an idea, and it kind of segues poorly into my next question, so I'm gonna go for it. The idea is maybe, and I don't know the logistics, but it'll make sense as I ask this. But you could maybe do one at a college or something like that. Like I'm sure they have community centers, or like I went to UWM, so like you could do one in the.
Yeah. My question for that is alcohol. How do you do that?
Tough shit.
Well, I know there's some colleges
not everyone has to.
I know that there's some colleges that allow alcohol on campus. When I went to allowed that, you had to go through the university. It was expensive.
Right.
But that, not to say you have to have alcohol to network, but it does help for those that are of age. True. They can go and they feel like they are more loose when they drink. I drink water at the events. I give networking tips and advice too. And if you're nervous networker and you're solo, get a drink, even if it's just water. Hold it in your non-dominant hand because shaking hands still exists. But if you're in a conversation you want to get out of, the easiest thing to do is finish your drink and say, oh, I'm going to go get another one. And then you're out. You should do like, oh, it's great chatting with you, and I'm going to go meet with more people. But it's tricky if you're very shy. And the easiest thing is to have this drink that you're drinking, finish that, you're out.
Yes. One other tip, just because I'm excited to try this tip because I heard it after. Ask if you're really trying to get out of conversation with like somebody specifically. Ask that person who somebody else here is that you think they should talk to, and ask them to introduce.
That's a good one too.
Then you're kind of slipping out, because like it's unfortunate because like a lot of people go there and they want to meet everybody, which I think is the purpose. And I want to encourage that. But at the same time, like you kind of accidentally get pigeonholed by people that either know you and want to talk all day because you haven't seen them in a while, or like people that just have a really good conversation. It's like, I want to talk to more people. So like, I just want to put it out there. It's okay. You're not being an asshole.
Right. And the funny thing is, I am in the same boat as these introverts to an extent when I'm not hosting the event. I've got the perfect excuse as the host. I'm like, oh, how'd you hear about the event? Oh, I can work a room, no problem when I'm hosting. But when I'm a guest to someone else's event, and if I don't know anyone in the room, it's like, oh, who'd I break the ice with? Or if I know the one friend, I'm going to go hit them up. But that friend wants to go network, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, you don't.
So I have certainly been in those situations where it's hard to approach. So I get it from the other side too.
So back to my question. I've diverted here.
Yeah, it's all good.
How do you get spaces? And I bring it up as kind of a personal question because you've been to places like St. Kate. You've been to places like the Art Museum. You've been to places that are very hard to get access to. So how do you go about doing that? Let's get some secrets out here.
Well, it's not really a secret. It's reaching out. And I try to get an email so I have a writing record, which I learned along the way was super important. Thankfully, I did that before I knew I needed to. I reach out and I say, hey, we're a networking event. This is what we do. Is there a way that our group can come and host our event there from this time to this time? We just want to make sure there's no other group is the way I phrase it. We want to make sure there's no other group also going to be in here because, we just don't want to.
Yeah, you don't want random intermingling.
But I've made it a point not to say reserve, because if you say reserve, then they're going to say, well, that's going to cost money. So it's another R related word. I can't remember it offhand, but it was just like,
It'll come to you as soon as you walk out the door.
I know.
Yeah.
But that's why I literally copy paste old emails because I don't have to figure it out again. You figure it out once and you're done. And so it's basically reaching out and saying, hey, And whenever I'm not sure, I'm like, there's no charge for this, right? And then they're like, yeah, there's no charge. But they've had a few that say, yeah, well, we require this charge. I was like, we don't have a budget for this. Yeah. And if they push on it, then I'm like, all right, I'll go somewhere else. Because I've had that for a couple of venues I really wanted to get into.
Yeah.
And it's like, one was a rooftop thing off of old Third World Street. That sounds weird to me right now.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it used to be bootleggers.
Yes.
Way back in the day. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
But that place had a cost of like $1,000. I was like, nope, absolutely not. And then I had other venues that I tried. And pre-pandemic for sure, Thursdays were off nights for bars, and they were excited to have you there. Since the pandemic, I've reached out to a couple and they're like, ooh, Thursdays are karaoke night, which I'm not going to go in there if there's an open mic night of any sorts, because that gets distracting. Or it's our trivia night now. And it's like, you don't want to go there either because people are quiet and we're talking. It's not a good situation. So that's another reason to reach out, just to make sure that there's not something going on. The Discovery World thing happened because someone came to my event that worked at Discovery World. And they said, we're trying to show that Discovery World isn't just for kids. It's also like if you are an adult and you want to host an event there, or like, heck, if you go without kids, it's still a fun thing as an adult. Absolutely. And I agree. I've done it a few times. So they're like, we would love to host you in here we'll put a bar in here and everything. And I was like, sold. So we did that one, and that got us like 100 people. And then I knew I needed to do an anniversary event because I wasn't making that mistake twice. And so we hosted the anniversary event at Discovery World. That one was a little pricey, but we had Margle Media sponsor the event, and they covered it. And I was like, this is great. You pay for this. And then along the way, I had met Molly, who worked at the art museum. She had come to some of my events. And she said, you should host it at the art museum. And I was like, all right, we can do that. And they're like, love what you're doing, love the core group. We'll give you the best discount we can. It wasn't free.
Right.
And I worked with Moet through Badger Liquor, and they sponsored paying the DJ and a couple aspects, but they couldn't cover all of it. So I still had to eat some of that cost, which is at the time of somebody that didn't have a lot of money in his bank was like, oh, this is rough. But I knew it would get people talking, and that's really what I wanted, and I got a good turnout for that. Some venues will reach out to me specifically because I've built up enough of a reputation. Right. They want me in there, and that's great. But I still have some venues that are sticklers on charging me for something, and I'm still in that mode of like, I know there's venues out there that won't charge me, so why would I pay for this? I'll make exception for anniversary events because I'm trying to find higher profile locations, but it's tricky. Like, I still don't have the location for the next one. And I'm all about figuring out the event before the current one. So the next one's announced. I got time, but like, I've been talking to my team about this for 5 months. I'm like, let's not put ourselves in that situation again. And we're in that situation again. Yeah. But it'll work out.
It's unfortunately the way the cookie crumbles. So one thing about you that I think is super important is the way you give back. There are many things that you do, food drives, obviously you host hashtag a free marketing event. There's so many things that you can do. We can go on and on, but I want to dive deeper into 22 push-ups. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about how that started. How many days are you at? And kind of what that's all about. I'll let you do the math.
Yeah, I was like, I knew what Sunday was because I was at a mental health event and I knew that number.
So because I'm going to my iPad's calculator to do the push-up math.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, the 22 push-up challenge started as a challenge to do 22 push-ups a day for 22 days for the, at the time, 22 combat veterans that die by suicide each day. The stat comes from a 2013 Veteran Affairs report. The number has fluctuated over the years, and frankly, at this point, it gets tricky to navigate and figure out what the actual number is. And I'm just like, it started as 22, and as it changes, like, do you change it? It's like the marketing and the branding is around 22 push-up challenge.
Yes,
you can't keep changing the name because that'll get confusing. So you just consistently do the 22, but. as the ALS Bucket Challenge, good example of it. When you do the challenge, you get a challenge and nominate somebody else to do it, and then it continues that way. So for 22 days, each day that you participate, you get to challenge somebody to join the challenge. And I had a fraternity brother that was doing it, and I was like, uh-oh, this is coming for me soon. And he didn't end up nominating me. He's later told me, he's like, I just didn't think you could do 22 push-ups. And I was like, fair, because I did struggle. But I saw it coming.
It's not easy.
And I got to 17 working up to it because I was like, it's coming for me. It's coming for me. I don't want to do it. I'm not even going to like comment on any of my friends' posts because I don't want to be like, oh, JMatt. Oh.
Guess who's next?
My best bud got challenged. And early on into he challenges me. I was like, oh. And it was the day that I learned I could get to 17. Of people pushing or pushing up or whatever. And one guy was going for a year. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to do this for a year. But I had recently read that it takes 66 days to form a new habit.
Yep.
And I was like, I'll go for 66 days. If I can make it to 66, I have formed a habit and I can continue to do this. I get to day 66 and I do it with a listener from Kiss FM. And she was a veteran or is a veteran, was active. And we did them together. It was great. And she's like, oh, so now you're all done? I was like, I don't think so. I think I'm going to keep going. So it was no longer like day 44 out of 66, day 45. It was now just day 67, day 68. And it kept going because when I got to a year, guess who didn't stop? The guy that's 9 months ahead of me. We've chatted several times, but I had to do the math because I'm like, I can never catch you, but if you slip up, you miss a day. I'm coming for you. You got to stay on. We joke with each other for sure. Luckily, it's not a streak-based thing, but like the days that you do it.
Yeah.
So I've celebrated milestones of like 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,200, because that's a good number. I didn't celebrate 2,500 because it just snuck up on me, and I was just like,
well, if you had done 2,200, then
I know this is just 300 more. I am on day. I just did the math. 4, 5, 6, 7. Is it Thursday today?
Today is Thursday.
All right, so today is day 2,508.
2,500. I told myself I was going to do this morning. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, you did.
55,176 push-ups officially.
If we're accurate. And I have something that I call the ADHD push-up because sounds silly, but I get to like 9 and then I zone out. Because it's just a habit now.
Even just like exercising, like, you're like, was that 8 or 9? Well, now I have to do
and then I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, I was accurate on my count, but then I second guess myself. So now when I get to 22, I have to do the extra one because occasionally what I think is the ADHD push-up is actually 22.
100%, yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times it's 23.
Yeah.
And I could edit it and cut it out there, but I'm like, not going to do that. So I just call the extra one the ADHD one just for good measure.
So obviously we talked about the flu tide, we talked about cream puff, like you know, you've had some famous people join you on some of these, you've done it at some great events. I know you did it at Summerfest on stage. Tell us some of those moments. How did that kind of come to be? So doing them with musicians, that's Summerfest invited me, and then they're like, we'll give you the press list of all the reps for all the musicians coming to Summerfest. I was like, that seems like a lot of responsibility and power. I'm going to hit up all of them. Yeah. And the first year I got some like up and comers that no one's ever heard of, and that was fine. And then Kiss FM was interviewing some DJ or some musicians before Summerfest. And I wanted to do push-ups with one of them, but I was like, I don't know if this is going to be cool to bring up. And Riggs was doing the interview. All right, Riggs.
And Riggs does the push-ups with me occasionally. He supports the cause. And it's not even like lying or anything. Like, it was legitimately my birthday.
Okay.
So they do the whole interview. They're wrapping up. And Riggs looks over to Steve Aoki and he says, hey, I know we didn't talk about this beforehand and you can totally say no, but if you're doing an interview in front of people, he's not going to say no. He's like, JMatt back there, it's his birthday today. He does something called a 22 push-up challenge. Is there any way that you'd be willing to do push-ups with him right now? Put him on the spot. But the thing about Steve Aoki, and people may not know, he's a EDM producer, DJ, that sort of thing. He also is very much so on the clean life, and he works out every day. He's very fit.
Yes.
And so the idea of like putting him on the spot, push-ups for him were going to be no problem. So he's like, sure, I'll do it. So I come up from the back. Riggs is in there with us. And this is a narrow space, by the way. So like people like to tell me my form is wrong. I have the wide stance here. I do inverted ones now.
Listen, how many people aren't doing 22 push-ups every day?
Right.
So they can shut up.
I know. It's not about the technique. It's about the symbolism. But I'm now in this really tight situation. So for me, because like the different modes that you can do push-ups are different muscles.
Yes.
So I am now in a situation where I am crammed in here, which is the right way to do push-ups to many. And so I'm like, oh no. So I'm doing push-ups and I'm trying to keep up with Steve Aoki, who is just miles ahead. I will say the only other person that ever made me feel like I needed to whisper, slow down. Donald Driver. Yeah. Donald Driver was another tough guy to do push-ups with. But it was just like, oh, we got it done. And it's turned into something where I do push-ups with musicians and people that are touring and coming to town. Because, yeah, it's cool to meet these people. It's cool to get photos with them. But they're never going to forget the guy they did push-ups with.
Right.
And it's for a good cause. And it's for awareness. Because the more people you can collab with anything, the more you can spread your message. And these people have such a reach and such popularity. If I can get them involved, and if I'm lucky, like one time Flosstradamus, who was probably more well-known back in the day and still well-known to an extent, but probably lesser than others, he did them with me. We did it, Summerfest, Dylan Francis. Like we were supposed to do
I was going to ask because I remember Dylan Francis specifically.
That one was an interesting one. We were supposed to do it with Flosstradamus, before his set. And we were going to do it kind of like backstage. You could see the crowd or whatever. But he had something happen. He was trying new tech and just wasn't lining up well. And I can just kind of read the room. And I was like, this is not a down. I'm just going to stand awkwardly and wait.
Yeah.
And then he goes on set and he does a thing. His tour manager comes over. He's like, I'm so sorry. We still want to do this, but it's going to have to be after his set. And you can go out to the crowd, shoot content, and do whatever you want. I was like, sweet, love that, because you also need permission for that from musicians.
Exactly.
And I was like, I have permission from an artist. I'm going to go out there and shoot all this content. So I go out, I come back. And I was a little giddy because I'm a fan of Dylan Francis. And I was like, the chances of Dylan Francis walking by is pretty high. So we get ushered into the green room after Floss gets off stage. And he's like, hey, you want to do it on stage when Dylan's performing? I was like, wait, what? And
Floss was saying this.
Floss was saying this. And it was his idea. It wasn't me saying this.
Right.
He's like, we could do it off to the side. And then we hear a knock on the door. And he's like, it's probably Dylan. And you forget that, like, some of these people tour together. But oftentimes at Summerfest, people don't tour together. It's an opener for a headliner, and they don't tour together. Just that's how it formed.
Yep.
But this time, they did tour together. I didn't realize that. So thinking to myself, like, sure it is. And then in walks Dylan Francis. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And they're talking very casually, like I'm a long-term friend talking about some stuff, very private stuff. And I was like,
I shouldn't be here right now. I shouldn't be here right now.
This is amazing. I wanted to ask for a photo, but like we're literally 5 minutes before Dylan's getting on stage. And I just generally know, like, they're in their zone. You don't want to like do that. If you miss out on a photo, whatever.
Right. I
have the story. And Dylan was like, you guys just want to do it up on stage, all like the top level and everything? And I was like, I look at Floss, and Floss is like, yeah, that sounds cool. And they're so nonchalant about it. Like they do push-ups on stage all the time. And they're like, yeah, this will be totally fine. So just listen for the song at the time was I Like to Move It, Move It. And he did a remix to it. He's like, when that song hits, do it to that song and you'll be good during that. And then I'll go into my full thing and you're off stage. So then he leaves, he does his thing, and Floss and I are still chatting. And then we start hearing it, because you can hear it pretty well backstage.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I think this is the song. I think we got to go right now. And he's like, yeah, yeah, let's go. And he's so casual about it. I have a friend with me filming it and getting the crowd shot. And I thought we were going to be off to the side. And then I get a tap. You can't hear anything. And he's like, want to go up here? Like with his hands, like want to go up to the big stage where Dylan is standing. And I was like, and so I tap my friend and we go up there. And I don't know what's going on now because I'm just, well, where am I? How am I back behind Dylan Francis during an EDM show at Summerfest, like pinnacle moment. And so we line up, Floss and I, there's not a lot of space either.
Right.
So like Flosstradamus and I are now like in ready mode. And I thought we were just going to go, right? And I look at him, I do these like the motioning to do push-ups. And he's like, and I like looking back, I understand what happened. The song was almost over when we got up there.
Okay.
So Floss talked to Dylan and Dylan had to do a loop and bring it back around. So then we were waiting for the drop. And then we were doing it in sync with the song.
Right, because and he wants to give a point where he can allow that to be something that happens.
And the crowd can't see us.
Right.
So that wasn't even part of it, but it was just like you were able, it was a beautiful moment for sure. And we were able to do the push-ups, we get it done off the stage and got it posted same night and was able to mix it with music and all that. It's just the real fascinating thing about that one, great experience, one of the top ones. This is when collaborator feature started being a popular thing.
Yes.
And I was like, well, we'll see if it happens. I collab with Flosstradamus and he accepted. So that video skyrocketed. And it was phenomenal because I had captions. I really put effort into making this one good. Not that I don't make the other ones good, but like extra effort because it had potential.
People need to understand when there's a special occasion.
It had the potential. And so him sharing it and accepting the collaboration, it is still there. The song has gotten muted from Instagram and then unmuted and then it's come in and out. And I'm like, it still works. So yeah, it just... Don't be afraid to ask the question. The worst they can say is no. And this time they said yes. And me being patient and not being like, oh, so I got to do the push-ups.
Yeah.
Me being flexible and coming back after his set made it even better than it could have been.
Exactly. And you never know. So one thing that I personally look up to you a lot about is just your openness and vulnerability on social media. And I think it's super valuable. And I've done this in my own regard as well. But talk to me about the importance of, I'm just going to be broad and I'm going to let you take this where you want to, but just mental health and vulnerability, both related to and unrelated to social media.
Yeah. So I've been struggling with a myriad, I don't even know if that's the word, a range of diagnoses and mental health conditions since I was a kid. And I wasn't necessarily open about it. It took me a long time to go to therapy and trust that process. I was very hesitant. And it took a while for me to find people to confide in about various things. And some people broke that trust and some people surprised me at being even more trustworthy. And when I started the push-up challenge, it was an opportunity for me to be public about it. And now I could have just made it the 22 push-up challenge and it is what it is. But on day 10, I realized it was a release, more than just the push-ups. But I am not a veteran. And I've made that clear to people because I don't want to get that confused. I don't ever want someone to think I'm a veteran. Nothing against it, but like I get the stolen valor thing. And I'm like, definitely not trying to do that. But I am somebody who has lost a cousin to suicide. I am somebody that has suicidal ideation. And unfortunately with suicidal ideation, you can be good and then suddenly it can come back in. And just because you're good now doesn't mean you're good forever. Suicidal ideation is just unfortunately a thing that will always be with you. And it comes kind of suddenly. And it's rough to deal with. And it's hard to explain to people that have never really dealt with it. Cause it's not, it is unnatural, but it's an uncomfortable topic in general, but it's also a difficult conversation for people to have and then try to find normalcy in it. Cause like, to me, it's normal, but I know it's not normal, but you can only know what your normal is. And then having, as a teen, major depression, and then it just became depression because I wasn't majorly or severely. Then there was a portion where it's severely, and then along the way, they labeled it as persistent depressive disorder. So it's like, you might be good now, but hey, stay on your A game because you never know. And unfortunately, the better you get at controlling the symptoms and healing and going through it all, your mind finds way to break through. So theoretically, each time that I have to re-experience severe depression and suicidal ideation, it's more intense than it had been in the past. It's tricky. And then beyond that, ADHD and attentive type used to be just ADD for me, but like, updates. And then I got OCD by default because I have something called trichotillomania, which is the compulsion to pull out your own hair. And it happens to 1% of the population. And in that, I think it's like 1 in 4 of that 1% are men. So it's super rare for me to have it. Super fun. Yeah. And then, like, you can find the bright side in a lot of things. And I'm like, I just don't see a bright side in trichotillomania. Also, it's really long and hard to spell. That's make it tricky, whatever. It's a mouthful.
Every time I have to go to the pharmacist, I'm like, I'm here for like that. I don't know how to spell it. I don't know how to pronounce it. But like, if you say it to me, I'll know. So
it's like, weird. It has a community too. They're the tricksters. And I was like, I don't love that it has a theme. But I was like, it is what it is. But through doing the push-up challenge, it was the only real mental health challenge that was consistent on social media at the time. And even really to the date. Like, I don't think I've seen anything else pop up that are like, ooh, I can get into that. So
even the ALS came and went.
Yeah. So the push-up challenge, and I think the push-up challenge has lost popularity for sure, but it's a good, healthy thing for people to do push-ups anyways. So it's an easy thing to theoretically continue. Whereas the bucket challenge, you're like, I'm not going to dump ice water on my head every single day. Doing the push-up challenge in my story, I started becoming more comfortable with talking about it. And then I also used the caption in the Instagram as like a journal entry, because each day I was like, I had to figure out something to talk about. So I would, for myself, kind of put where my mind was. And some days you don't have anything, that's fine. But I would put kind of where I'm at, and I would be transparent. And there was certainly a day that I was very close to considering attempting suicide. And that was happening during the push-up challenge. And the thing with suicidal ideation, at least for me, and I think for many people, is you get to a point where you are very seriously considering it. And unfortunately, so many that do consider it end up taking their life, attempting, surviving, and that sort of thing. If you can make it to that, like right before that point, you make it to sleep, you wake up the next day, you've broken through the lowest low. And what I think a lot of people will assume you're faking for, because if you do confide in someone, and I've done this, and like literally the next day, I'm like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Like I broke through it and I got to my lowest low, and you can start rebounding. And it's not like it feels night and day to the person that's supporting you, because you're just like, you were like real serious, concerningly level. And then today you're like, not even, you would never. Like, how did you change in overnight? And I was like, that's kind of how this works. And it's so hard to explain. And that makes people think you're attention seeking or that you're making it up or whatever. It's like, no, like, this is a good thing. Yeah. It means I'm coming out of it, and it's so good. But I often, I've had some people that have done it to me in the sense of like, I'm going to do it. And in college, I had to call 911 to get a safety check on someone. I saw her like 2 days later in school. We weren't that close, but she confided in me, and she was not very happy with me. And I get it because I've been on her side as well. She's alive and well. She's married. She has kids to this date. And so like, in a sense, I may have, I don't know how close she was. You never know. I don't want to think back and be like, well, I should have done something. Well, I did something, and she has a full family, full life and going. I've had another guy who I wasn't that close with, but went to college with his girlfriend at the time. And he was talking very serious that he wanted to end it. And he's like, I was like, do you have the means to do so? And for the record, you asking someone, are you going to attempt, or are you suicidal, or do you have a weapon, doesn't trigger them to do it. It's already on their mind. You're not planting the idea. You're literally checking to see how severe the situation is.
Right.
And if you need to urgently react. And I called 1-800-273-8255. Now it's just 988. It's the suicide prevention lifeline. And you can use it as not the person struggling, but how do I help people struggling?
Okay.
And they said, well, are you near him? Can you go to him? Can you check on him? Because that's going to do a lot better than like a safety check and the police are there. And I was like, he is local. I don't know him that well, but I'll go. So I went, and he was like rage mode, like severe depressed, not like lashing out, but he was lashing out against himself sort of vibe. And we had a conversation, and he was very upset, but like upset with himself and very suicidal. And it was an extreme situation. And I just stayed with him until he literally went to sleep. And then I stayed overnight, slept on the couch. Next day, he was night and day difference, better. And maybe it was, if I hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened. But being there helped in that situation. And I'm glad that I showed up. And the reason why this person particularly reached out was because of the social media content that I was posting. And we had hung out here and there, we'd chat here and there. But through my advocacy, through my work on social media, I have become somebody where people want to reach out and check in with. I've had people troll in the comments and then send me a DM and like, oh, you're not serious about this. Like, yeah, I am. And then you find out they're struggling and they were testing you to make sure that they could open up to a stranger on social media. So I never take these like criticisms. It's sometimes hard to hear, of course, but like, you'll have veterans that'll come in and be like, oh, you know, push-ups don't save lives. I was like, yeah, but like this conversation we're literally having where you're calling me out, it's starting a conversation. So you're kind of doing the opposite of your point, but here we are. And I'm very sensitive to that. And I'm very cautious with how I approach trolls because when it comes to the push-up challenge, they're often struggling or hurting or trying to go through something. And I don't want to just ignore it and delete the comment because that's not helpful.
Right.
So how do I address it with also not putting a strain on my own mental health? Yeah. So it's balancing the two. But overall, I have just been able to find my voice and control over the stuff that I deal with. And even my phrasing has changed. I used to call it like a mental illness. And I'm like, oh, I don't feel like that's, not to be like politically correct, but like, I don't think mental illness is a good way to phrase it because then you're saying, oh, I have a weakness, I have an illness. You have a mental health condition. Yeah. Is kind of what I landed on. I was like, I like that because it's a condition of my mental health. Yep. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, it struggles, all this sort of thing. But like, I can function with a condition. If it's an illness, it sounds like I'm never going to get better.
Right. And it does vary. And, you know, I'm empathetic to the situation because I've had to call wellness checks on people that I'm not local to. And, you know, I've been with my wife who has gone through the complete stage of being in repression to remembering everything to now the recovery process. I myself, albeit a much smaller situation, have been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. So I'm empathetic to it. And I appreciate you opening up because it is so valuable. And I do want to double click on what you mentioned that you can call resources also to ask how you can help, because I think the hardest part for people is the how can I help? Because
what if I say the wrong thing?
100%. And I think people are so afraid to help because they don't want to push somebody farther by accident, because then they're going to live with that guilt their whole life. But on the flip side of it, if you don't, you know, it's a tough spot.
In college, I was a social work degree. And my whole thing was like, I don't know how to talk to people when sensitive topics come up and like they confide in me. Like, what do I do? That's legitimately one of the biggest questions as a young adult that I had. And through the program, I learned that if somebody opens up and confides in you, the first thing you do is, thank you for telling me.
Yes.
You thank them because that takes bravery, some courage. And that simple gesture also helps them be seen. And then the next thing you can do is be transparent. Say, I don't really know what to say in this moment. And there's two ways you can go with it. Because guys are the worst at this, of just listening and not giving advice.
Yes.
So you have to do do you just want me to listen or do you want me to give you feedback? That's fine. But let's say we're past that point. You can always go with, I don't really know what to say right now. And be transparent with that. I don't really have anything that I can offer, but I'm here for you. just being there, willing to be present in this moment of somebody's crisis means a lot. And then plus you put the setting out there like, I don't really know what to say, but I'm here for you. Cool. Now you don't have to worry about like saying something profound. You can just be there.
A lot of people would almost rather it be that way too. On the other end, I mean, there are times both my wife and myself have been in situations like, I don't know how I'm feeling and I don't know how to vocalize this, but I'm just going to tell you that there's something going on and then we'll approach things as they go. Also, from somebody who's going through something, it's important if the other person really doesn't know what to say, look, I want to help you, but I don't know how I can help you best. Because there are different ways, everybody in different moments, the same person feeling different things will want different means of comfort. So even just being like, I just want to be transparent with you and say, I'm hearing you. I'm here for you. What do you need?
And how often do you, the person that's in that crisis mode, have people tell you, what do you need? What helps you? It's rare.
Very.
Because when you do get that question, you're like, I don't know.
It's a stopper for the person going through it. Because I mean, it's very much like well, I know I need something, but I don't even know what I need. So now I have
if I knew what I needed, I would have been able to fix this myself. I'm in the same thing because like when I'm severely depressed going through the suicidal ideation, if someone were to reach out and then be like, oh, what helps? I'm like, I don't know. I was supposed to set up my self-care emergency kit while I was healthy and I forgot to do that. And now I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So what are some resources? We'll kind of end on this. What are some resources for people that do need help or, what are ways that people can? You mentioned something to me that I think was very profound and I think I'm just going to double click on it. It was a previous conversation we had, but you mentioned it's okay if you don't have the right therapist today. You can always find the right therapist for you. Yeah,
I do tell people that all the time because people are skeptical about therapy and media portrays it poorly where it's police mandated, court mandated, and then you're stuck and you're locked in. That's media portrayal, and that's rare.
Yeah.
You've got to be like, it has to be ordered and whatever. And that doesn't happen that much. I don't have the statistics on it, but a lot of people that go to therapy are going on their own and they're seeking help for very specific things. And you can look for specialists that specialize in ADHD, in depression, in anxiety, and whatever it is that you want to work on, you can find that. And if you're lucky, you can find one that specializes in multiple things. Harder to find. The difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is able to prescribe you meds, and a psychologist doesn't. So if you just want therapy and you're not interested in meds, save yourself the money because psychiatrists are more expensive. Psychiatrists are also generally there to monitor your side effects and your how the meds are going. Yep. So they want to know about you and what your struggles are and but they're not really there like a psychologist. The therapist is there for you to process everything. So oftentimes, if you're seeing a psychiatrist, you're also seeing a psychologist and you're doing both. So start with a psychologist because they're a little easier to get to and they can often refer you to a psychiatrist.
True.
If you go to a psychologist appointment, and you can do it by gender. If you want to talk to a woman, talk to a woman. If you want to talk to a man, talk to a man. If in the process you're like, this just isn't what I want, fine. Let them go. You don't even have to tell them you should tell them, but like you can be done with them and start with somebody else. I've had the same therapist since the pandemic. And I continue to go to her and schedule appointments, and you got to do it a couple days out. If I go and I meet with the person and I'm having a good day.
Yep.
I'm like, wow, things are great. I don't have anything to complain about. Most people cancel the appointment.
Yep.
Most people go into those meetings because I've literally talked to my therapist about this, and they'll go in and like, I don't really have anything to complain about. Everything's kind of going good. And then it's a weird, awkward thing. I go in there, I'm like, things are great. Here's the great things happening in my life, because now they have a kind of a baseline of like, this is where he should be, like on a good day.
And where they want to see you on every day.
This is where it's working. So then when I'm not there and things are struggling, they can notice it better, but they are also able to see things that make me happy and things that are going well and how, like what that looks like to help coach.
It helps them help you.
Yes.
I mean, let's be honest.
Go when you're having a good day too.
Yes. So
celebrate with your therapist.
Yeah, truth. So that's all I have. I want to just give you the floor. What's next for JMatt? What's next for hashtag? What's next for all of the fun things that you're working on?
Sleep. Just kidding.
Same.
Sleep later.
Yeah.
No. So hashtag MKE, people don't really realize this because they're there for so many different reasons. Theoretically, I have a lot of funnels that like lead to wherever it should go, and it's elaborate, even more elaborate than I intended it for it to be, but it is what it is. If you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur or I hate the word influencer, but like a content creator trying to grow and have a presence, you're an entertainer, a CEO, whatever it is. If you're looking for a coach, I do coaching at a monthly service sort of thing, like check-in, content, calendar management, strategy, and all that sort of thing. If you're not really sure what you need, but you're like, I need some help, I do one-off 1-hour consultations. And then oftentimes that's all people need, but it's during those conversations, you kind of realize, actually, it'd be good to do ongoing. I'm short form video for hire. So if someone's like, we know this is important, we don't really know how to do this, I'll come in, I'll shoot it. And while I'm shooting it with you, you're seeing how I do it. And oftentimes you figure out, okay, well, I can do this on my own after a few.
Right.
I do sponsored content too through TikTok and Instagram. So if there's a brand out there that like wants to get in front of my audience, that's an option. I'm down to take sponsors for networking events. The easiest way to collab with me that I often will just do it and it's all good. If you're like, I do push-ups with you, I'm like, all right, cool. That gave me a day where I didn't have to figure out push-ups today.
Right.
And the worst part with ADHD is I'll literally be driving to meet up with someone to do push-ups, and I'll be driving along the way. I'm like, probably stop there and do some push-ups right now. I'm going somewhere to do them. Or I will have just done them, and I'll be like, I've never been there before, because I've learned that push-ups every day, boring to see, but it has become, people are like, where is he going to do them today? Because I do them all over the place, and I try not repeating locations as much as I can. So that's always top of mind for me. So I always forget, like, when I have, I'm doing that in a few hours out of my routine. Well, it'll work out. So I will always do push-ups if you're within 20 miles of where I live. I don't go too far, but like, it is what it is.
I'm outside of that bubble, but
yeah, so that, and then, so check out my handles and stuff. And if you see something I'm doing that you want to know more about, or collab or engage or whatever, I'm open to it all.
Awesome. And with that, we appreciate you for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share, rate, review, whatever the things are that need to happen. Go do those things. That would be greatly appreciated. We'll put all of JMatt's social handles and everything to get in touch with him down below. We'll also put the health hotlines that you have.
988 is the number to know.
Yep.
You can text or call it.
Yeah, we'll put all those in the description as well. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and until next time.